around 8.6. That's actually not so bad. The other day we were doing 10.
Yeah, but I was revving it more too.
The Rhine River does not always move at the same speed. So when the current suddenly accelerated after passing through the last lock on the Rhine, it felt like we were a tiny moped that had suddenly found itself on the German Autobahn, desperately trying to keep up with the flow of traffic and not get run over by huge trucks. Join us as we head down the Rhine River and think about the direction of our lives. It all goes north from here. I'm Maya, and this is Aladino. In mid-November, we converted our 28-foot sailboat into a riverboat, and we started going north, from the Mediterranean all the way to the North Sea. In front of us, we had 2,000 kilometers and 200 locks. Join us as we navigate river currents, discover incredible places, cruise through canals, wait out a global pandemic in the heart of France, and record the whole voyage with a new episode every Friday. This is North Through the Continent. We're going north through the continent.
So we have left Strasbourg. There's just a small little piece of kind of offshoot of the river before we re-enter the mighty Rhine, and then our day shall continue. Who knows where we'll end up tonight.
And here the branchment ends, and we are about to get back into the Rhine.
It's a branchment.
The branchment?
Branchment?
Doesn't exist?
I don't think that's a word.
Well,
if it is a word, I've never heard it. But it's a good one.
A little branch.
Yes.
So it's a branchment.
Okay.
Anyway, happy Rhine River! As magic as my carpet is, I always appreciate some currents when they're going with us, of course.
We had only 2 more locks in front of us before we'd be on free-flowing river, which would eventually take us all the way to the Netherlands. We had heard that the upcoming section of river had really strong currents, but we figured that going downstream along with it would be just fine.
I'm excited for the German section. I think there's going to be some really beautiful things ahead. At least that's what people keep telling us. But after that, we're getting into the Netherlands, and that's really, for me, the gem. That's what I'm so excited about. I am actually Dutch, kind of. I mean, I was born in Canada, but my parents both lived in Holland, and they both speak Dutch, and I have a lot of family there. Holland was the first European place I've ever been to, and to me, Holland, it just has so much magic in it. There's so much nautical history. There's just this feeling of coziness everywhere. The Dutch really know how to do cozy well. So I'm absolutely thrilled that we're going to be going there on our own boat. The first time I went to Holland, you know, I didn't have a boat. The dream of boating was this kind of distant thing in my mind. But I remember saying to my mom as we were walking around Amsterdam how much I would love to come back here one day with my own boat, and I'm just so thrilled that that's going to be coming true pretty soon. But not yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. Not yet.
And as of myself, I might add, I'm very difficult to please with new adventures.
It's very true.
No, but
you would think he's open-minded. He's not.
I am. I just want to announce that, well, on one side I was very spoiled because my parents love traveling so much, so I got to travel a lot already. Now for the journey ahead, actually my passion before sailing was biking, and I have explored all kinds of biking, from going up the passes in the Swiss Alps, like more of the masochistic side. I enjoyed that, and as well I enjoyed it again as a lifestyle, like I do now with racing a sailboat, but also living on it and sailing. So I've done a couple of trips on my bicycle, and one of them was leaving in Zurich, Switzerland. Went through Basel, kind of, because the Rhine passes through there, and I did the whole Rhine into the Netherlands. And yeah, so that's not to say that I know everything that is ahead, but more to say I'm actually excited for the section of Germany which is about to come, or maybe a little bit later, when it will become a little hilly again and there are vineyards and castles. I have a few good memories from that trip on a bicycle. For now, there was a lock every 7 nautical miles, like sometimes it was 6, sometimes 8, but around the 7. And so we've reached another one in just an hour because we're going 7 knots.
Woohoo!
Yeah, yeah, not even putting much strain on the engine, just cruising gently. So we're at the lock and I called, there is no barge and the light is green. So let's go.
We were super happy that we got the lock to ourselves. The weather was warm and once again we took off downriver. And in front of us was something very exciting, the very last lock for us on the Rhine River. The locks are all concentrated in the upper section of the river, and coming up we had a huge stretch of free movement. Since our only issue so far had been with the commercial ships in the locks, we thought that all our issues were about to disappear. It didn't quite turn out like that, but for now, things were great. This is alright. This is really, really alright. So there's a little car ferry here which crosses the river just to the other side. And this side is in Germany. And then about halfway across, it turns into France. And over there is France. Oh, I love European borders. And then we got to the final lock.
It was a little bit different coming into this lock because I tried calling but didn't get an answer, and we saw we had 2 barges ahead, so we just thought, let's be patient, they go first, it's better anyway, and maybe we get to go into the lock all by ourselves again. But we didn't get a response on the VHF, and those 2 barges went in and the light stayed green. So we thought, well, we couldn't communicate with them, but let's just go. It must clearly be green for us. And now here we are in the lock, and it's just incredible how big they are. There's 2 barges side by side, and we are in here too. And once we were inside, the lockmaster poked his head out of his station, and he told us that it's another VHF channel. Apparently it happens often that our book is not updated and it's actually channel 24 and not 18. But that's why the light was still on and he waited till we were in. And I'm very happy to announce that this is the last lock until the Netherlands. Wow. Incredible!
But we still had one big final challenge. You might recall that we've had some issues with the propeller wash generated by these huge ships when they're in front of us in the lock. They're 3,000 tons and we're 3.5, so we're basically like a tiny rubber duck trying to swim with sea lions. But now there were 2 of these huge ships in front of us, so as the gates of the lock opened, we hung on and fended off anxiously.
Holy that was perhaps the highest my heart rate has gone in the lock. I don't think we filmed anything, unless the GoPro time-lapse was still on. I'm not sure if it was. Yeah, I mean, all went smooth on the way down, and then the 2 ships started their engines to maneuver out of the lock. Now, we've already experienced that one of these ships creates enough current, 2 of them at once, one directly in front and one kind of in front and also a bit to the side, was just completely overpowering.
Okay, it's Maya from the future here, jumping in to describe what happened. I did describe it kind of to the camera directly afterwards, but I'm not super proud of my description. I was just freaking out and it was rambling and it didn't make a lot of sense. But it was a very stressful situation. So basically what happened is when the two big ships turned on their engine, it just created a tremendous amount of current in an enclosed spot. And not only is it the current that we're contending with, but it's also the fact that the current is bouncing off the walls of this chamber, and so it's coming from all directions. And so one moment our boat would be slammed against the wall and I literally thought our fenders were gonna burst, and then the next moment it's being pried away and it's all we can do to keep hold of the lines and keep our boat actually tied to the wall as these big ships maneuver out. And it was extremely stressful, and we just felt really small and really powerless to be in this amount of current in this enclosed space. It's not like we could go anywhere. There's just big, huge concrete walls all around us. And so because we weren't faring so well being tied up to the wall, we decided to untie and follow the ships out. Of course, I mean, they were a little bit out already, but I think we made that decision a little bit too early, because then even motoring out of the lock was also difficult. Again, we were just contending with the whirlpools, and sometimes it felt like we were going to be smashed against the wall. We weren't, it was fine, but it was just really stressful, and I was quite scared by it. I was very scared by it. It was not an experience which I ever hope to recreate, and I will talk a little bit more about that reaction to it later in the video, but for now let's return to the river and the aftermath of this lock.
Now, as we continued downriver, the open Rhine stretched out in front of us. We had several hundred kilometers of uninterrupted downstream bliss before arriving in the Netherlands. But that downstream bliss also proved to be a bit disconcerting. The current was way stronger than what we had experienced before, and I'm sad I didn't film as much because I was honestly too full of nervous energy to think about the camera. Our GPS was reading speeds of 8 to 10 knots over ground as we shot along, about double our normal pace. To make matters worse, there were a lot of these breakwaters sticking out from the land, maybe to prevent riverbank erosion, and they further pinched the channel and decreased room to maneuver. And we had to maneuver. Huge ships kept appearing, and as a tiny pleasure boat, we've got to make sure we're out of their way. We pulled in for the night to a strange little lake where we could anchor, and even that was an adventure.
Are we on the bottom?
We should be, according to the depth sounder. I just feel some scratching.
It might just be seaweed.
We're not on the ground, but we're touching something.
Oh my gosh, okay, so we just rounded the corner into this anchorage, which our guidebook said you can anchor in, but there's a big sign saying Wassersport verboten, which means no sport boats. Anyway, so we're in this anchorage that is questionably forbidden, and there's barely any depth, so we are now on the bottom. I don't think we're very badly on the bottom. I think we'll get off. There's also a lot of wind, which is not making things easy. There's a lot of current, and there's a lot of really big ships. So honestly, this is just like quite a lot at the moment. There's a lot going on, and it's not relaxing. Let's put it that way.
Neither of us were in a good headspace. In fact, our heads were now being much bigger problems than anything else. With some time, we realized that we weren't touching the bottom at all. Aladino had been looking at the speedo and not the depth. The speed read 0.9, so we figured we must be touching. And sport boats weren't verboten at all. They were just forbidden in the one entrance section, but further along we could anchor without any trouble.
So dinner time. I made some wraps with guacamole and some chicken. Yeah, just winding down after the day. I think
We were both sort of tense after that situation in the lock. It kind of just gets your blood going, and so for the rest of the afternoon we were kind of in this heightened state. And there is a lot of current for sure, so it does require alertness, but we weren't in a good mindset. Like when we pulled into here, and I mean, you thought we were on the ground, which we weren't at all, and we saw this sign saying pleasure boats are forbidden, but there's all these pleasure boats up here, and there's all this traffic coming at us, and there was just a lot of things kind of going on at once. I'm trying to film something. It was just a bit hectic, so I'm really glad now to be at anchor. It's very calm here, it's very peaceful. There's bird song. I mean, there's some industry over there, but we set this up so we don't see it. First time we've been at anchor for a long time since leaving the Mediterranean, which feels good.
Anchor working so far.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot working against it. We're out of the current here. But yeah, I mean, I think the Rhine, it is a challenging route. We knew that before going into it, and I think we just have to try and be calm. I especially have to try and be calm tomorrow, because it will throw things at us. There will be whirlpools, there will be all of this current, and we just have to get through it. Fortunately, because there is so much current, it's going to be over with pretty quickly. So what do you reckon? If we keep up good speed, I mean, if we go all day, we can get to Holland in a week.
Oh, totally. A week, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the update. I am just sort of coming down off the day now. Let's eat. I'm hungry.
The Rhine is certainly not an impossible challenge. It was just a new challenge for us, and any new challenge requires some adjustment. Everyone's a beginner at the beginning, and we were getting a pretty fast introduction to the tireless strength of the Rhine and the ships which navigate it. Our job now was to adjust and learn. Perhaps we could have done this more gracefully, but that was also part of the lesson. The following day there would be more current, more traffic, more unknowns hurtling towards us, but it would feel slightly less frightening and slightly less unknown.
Anchor's up, let's go! So there's a barge right there immediately, and then there's another one immediately behind that one. It's pretty incredible what these guys are doing. I mean, they're heading upriver in this really strong current with completely loaded down. Pretty crazy, and they're still, I think they're going an average speed of about 5 knots, which is slow for them, but it's not that slow considering.
Every breath means letting go.
Okay, there goes the second boat. We're going into the river. Bows turning. We are in the Rhine. Oh my gosh, this adventure. Speed over ground, 8.6. That's actually not so bad. The other day we were doing 10.
Yeah, but I was revving it more too.
The one really good thing though is that we are using so little fuel. I mean, to get from here to the Netherlands, maybe we'll use a tank, 40 liters, maybe not even that much. So that's pretty great.
And the world is at my feet. Bring the heat. Deep sleep, big heat, cover me. Re-energize me. When I fantasize, deep sleep, big heat, cover me. Turn out the light.
We made good speed. I wasn't totally relaxed, but I wasn't as nervous as the day before either, and eventually the river widened a little.
The river is wider, or at least also the channel that is navigable, and I can also tell that therefore the current is a bit reduced. We have about a knot less speed, which was current before, because we're going at the same RPM. Yeah, interesting to study all these things as they change.
Even with the reduced current, we still did have to contend with the traffic.
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 big ships all coming upriver, one after another.
The big ships use a flag system to show what side of the river they want to travel on. The default traffic pattern is passing port to port, basically driving on the right-hand side of the river. However, sometimes the big ships can decide they'd rather pass starboard to starboard, in which case the upstream vessel will display a blue flag to signal its intentions. For small pleasure craft, we don't have blue flags, but basically we just have to get out of the way of whatever big ship is coming. I found the blue flag system to be one of the more difficult parts of navigation because some ships would come up one side of the river and some would come up the other. Magic Carpet is not super fast, and in fact we're usually moving slower than the barges. If we could have picked one side of the river and stuck with it, things would have been easier. But here, for example, we had one ship on one side of the river and several others on the other side, so we snuck in between. It required constant vigilance, so there was not a single moment of relaxation on the helm. For the rest of the day, we kept passing recreation zones and industrial zones. We passed through the city of Mannheim with its interesting modern architecture and large industrial zones. We saw more ships with blue flags, some of them confusingly located in the river. And fortunately, the current slowed down a bit to a more manageable pace. As we neared our destination for the night, we reflected on the day.
Yeah, I want to add that in my perspective, it's totally because it was a new challenge.
Yeah.
And it's always, I mean, always what you don't know or what you haven't done before is difficult. Once you know it, oh, it's easy. Well, because you know how and you have done it before.
Yeah.
So by that, I want to say that if by coincidence I was dropped on a boat that I have to steer in that section for one day, and then never again, I would have thought about it twice if I would have gotten that chance again. But since we were going second day on that section, I can definitely say I got used to it, and I would have been totally okay with doing one more week of that if it continued like this from here on, with a lot of current and no more locks. But it would have been definitely more tiring. But yeah, totally. Just to say that if it's just once, it might be not as enjoyable, but we get used to everything.
Yeah.
And once you know how to deal with it, then it's actually, yeah, it works pretty nice, and you can also enjoy the extra speed.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that goes with everything. If you know how to do something, then of course it's easy.
Exactly.
It's when it's something new that you've never done before that there's added challenges. And,
Exactly.
yeah.
So bring on the new challenge. We are approaching Worms, and I think that that's the name of the harbor and the city.
Oh, Germany.
And yeah, we call that harbor for the night. So in my guidebook, the instructions say if you're going downstream, of course, do a 180 and then come upstream and then go into the entrance. So I will try to follow these instructions and get into the harbor like that.
We drifted into the harbor, and we were home for the night. Despite the name, Worms turned out to be a lovely place, and we met some wonderful people in the harbor. Life was slowly relaxing back to normal. And
a quick thing to end out this video. As always, I want to say thank you to our patrons for making this and every episode possible, and an extra big thank you to these folks for going above and beyond every week and every month to make sure that these episodes keep happening, and we'll see you all next week.
Can you sit?
Ready? Interview time. Oh no.
This is what happens when I try to get Aladino to sit in front of the camera for a second. Beanie!